All right, so this is considered 1.2 for me. Just our basic order of operations, I was calling 1.1 on the worksheets anyways. I'm trying to stay organized, and this might help you guys. So anyways, absolute value. Anybody know what absolute value means? Have y'all seen absolute value before? We got one head shake. Anybody else seen absolute value before? But not sure about the name of it. Okay, so the definition of it is the distance of a quantity from zero. Okay, the symbol for absolute value are these bars right here. If you see a number inside those bars, that means absolute value. Okay, and when I say distance from zero, I'm talking about on a number line. All right, so I'm going to make a number line here. That's going to go to positive 3 and negative 3. All right. Let's say you see this right here. This means the absolute value of 2. Have y'all seen that? We've seen that, right? The absolute value of 2. What this means is how far from 0 is this number. So on your number line, here's 2. How many units away from 0 is it? 2 units. So the absolute value of 2 is 2. Tell me this. Can distance be negative? Can you walk a negative distance? Can you walk 20 feet? Can you walk negative 20 feet? No, okay? So distance is always positive, okay? So absolute value is always, when you take the absolute value of something, it's going to give you a positive answer, okay? So think of the absolute value of negative 3. Here's negative 3. Even though it's on this side of 0, how many units away from 0 is it? 3, right? If I walk from here to here, I would be walking 1, 2, 3 steps or 3 units. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Does that make sense? Y'all have seen absolute value before, I'm sure. You may not have talked about it much, but I'm sure you've seen it. Okay? How about the absolute value of negative 4.5? Now this one isn't on my number line, but you can imagine where it would be. It would be 1.5 more units over. Okay, if here's 4.5, how many units away from 0 is it? Negative 4.5 would be, no? Alright, so let me keep going. This is negative 4. This is negative 5. Here's 4.5 right here. Here's a half unit, half, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So it's 4.5 units away. How about the absolute value of 3? How many units away from 0 is 3? Can you be a negative distance away? It's just 3. Good. Good. Okay? So what you need to get in the habit of doing is when you see absolute value, you look at the number that you're looking at, but you ignore whether it's positive or negative, because the absolute value is always going to be positive. Okay? Don't overcomplicate this. Please, don't overcomplicate this. When you take the absolute value of something, you should get a positive answer, okay? And exactly what that number is. Okay, now let's look at, let's do some examples here of just absolute value operations, okay? So start with one that, without a number line, If I asked you for the absolute value of negative 15, you all should be able to tell me. Good, thank you. Again, it's just the number inside the bar without the negative sign. That's all it is. Alright, I want to show you a little bit of a tricky one. What if I said the negative absolute value of 10? Okay, think of absolute value sort of like parentheses. Okay, you look there first. You ignore anything outside of the absolute value. So this negative sign, I'm going to ignore it for a little while. What is the absolute value of 10? 10, right? So this right here gives me 10. 10 is 10 units away from 0. But I'm going to bring down my negative sign. So the negative absolute value of 10 is actually negative 10. Okay, everybody look at that for a second. See what we did there. This gives me a positive 10. That is this right here. But I'm bringing down this negative sign on the front, and I got to attach it to it. Okay? Again, you look inside your absolute value first. Let's do another one like that. Let's say I wanted to know the negative absolute value of 28. Again, you look in the absolute value first. Ignore this. Ignore this guy. What's the absolute value of 28? It's 28. It's just 28. But then you're going to bring down your negative sign. So this answer would be negative 28. Okay, let's get a little bit trickier. What if I said I'll hold on to that one. Let's do the absolute value of negative 6 plus the absolute value of 10. Okay? Again, think of your absolute value like parentheses. I don't know what that noise is. It does that occasionally, like a couple times a class period. I don't know. So again, you look inside your absolute value first, and then you look outside of the absolute value. So I'm going to start here with negative 6. What is the absolute value of negative 6? 6. So this gives me 6. What about the absolute value of 10? 10. And then I'm going to bring down my plus sign. And then now I'm going to actually add them together. What, 6 plus 10? 16. Alright, this one's going to be a bit longer. Let's do negative 10 plus the absolute value of 10 minus 8 minus 12. Okay, again, absolute value is like parentheses. So here's where we look first. Now what's 10 minus 8? 2. So this becomes the absolute value of 2. I'm going to bring down everything else. Now before you can do this addition and this subtraction, we need to completely get rid of absolute value. So what is the absolute value of 2? 2. So now we can drop these bars, that's what they're called, bars, bring everything else down, and now we can finally add and subtract this all together. Does addition and subtraction happen at the same time on order of operations? It does, right? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. The last two things happen at the same time. So if you wanted to, you could just type this whole thing in the calculator. Any of you guys got your calculators out? Y'all are going to want those. Grab those real quick. And when you get there, or when you get ready, type negative 10 plus 2 minus 12. Negative 10 plus 2 minus 12 should give me negative 20. Alright, this is going to be a simple yet confusing one. Negative absolute value of negative 8. I want to know what that equals. So the first thing is, this is the negative absolute value of negative 8. The first thing is, ignore anything outside of it. So I'm ignoring this. What is the absolute value of negative 8? 8. This gives me positive 8. Now I'm going to bring this down, and now I just have negative 8. That's my answer. All right, I'm flipping to the back here. What was that, example 5? We're on 6, okay?
Actually, you did 2 before.
I did do 2 example 4s, so this should be example 7. Way to keep up with things. Alright, this one should be a fairly easy one. The absolute value of 20 times the absolute value of negative 3. So again, look inside your absolute value first. We're going to ignore this times until we're ready for it. What's the absolute value of 20? 20. What's the absolute value of negative 3? Good, positive 3. And then bring down your times sign. And then 20 times 3 is 60. Alright, let's try a longer one. The absolute value of 28 minus 45 plus 3 plus the absolute value of negative 12. Alright, the absolute value, treat those like parentheses. Okay, so I'm going to look at the one that's on the left first. Okay, I'm looking at this one first. Inside the absolute value, I have a minus and a plus. According to the order of operations, you do those together, right? They happen at the same time. So you would just type this whole thing in the calculator. Somebody tell me, what's 28 minus 45? Thank you. So this is the absolute value of negative 14 plus the absolute value of negative 12. Now that there's nothing left to do inside these, I'm going to actually take the absolute value. What's the absolute value of negative 14? Good. What's the absolute value of negative 12? Now I'm going to add 14 and 12 and get 26. Alright, I want you guys to try this one. It's going to be kind of similar. So the absolute value of negative 52 plus 120 minus the absolute value of 16. Okay, I'll give you a couple minutes there to try that one. Alright, are y'all ready? Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to ignore all this. The first thing I want to do is I need to add negative 52 plus 120, and what is that? Say that again. 68. Now that there's nothing left to do inside of these, I'm going to take the absolute value. What's the absolute value of 68? What's the absolute value of 16? And then I'm going to subtract those things. 68 minus 16 is, what is it? 52? Yeah. Alright. A handful more. I want to get just a tad bit more complicated. I'm going to include a fraction in this one, okay? So this is going to be the absolute value of negative 3 times 4 times the absolute value of negative 6 over 3. Any guesses what we need to do first? Some of you are already working on it. That's a good sign. First thing we want to do is we want to multiply these, right? What's negative 3 times 4? It is negative 12. Now I'm ready to start taking the absolute value, right? So what is the absolute value of negative 12? This is 12. How about this one? The absolute value of negative 6 is what? So that's going to turn into positive 6 over 3. And then now you should simplify this first, right? 6 over 3 is 2. 12 times 2 is 24. I don't want to do it over there. I want to do it down here where I have room. Okay. Negative absolute value of 6 times the absolute value of 8 minus 4. Where do y'all think we should go first? Alright, so what is the absolute value of 6? 6, right? But I'm going to bring down this negative. Okay, my times sign. How about, what's 8 minus 4? 4. So this is the absolute value of 4, which is what? 4. So now I have negative 6 times 4, which is negative 24. Okay, I think 2 more and I'll be satisfied to leave you guys alone. I'm going to do the absolute value of negative 16 over 4 minus the absolute value of 10 times the absolute value of negative 4. Now, inside of each of those absolute values, there's really nothing to do, right? Nothing to combine. So I would go ahead and I'd take the absolute value of everything. What's the absolute value of negative 16? 16. So that becomes 16 over 4. I'm going to go ahead and bring down my minus. What's the absolute value of 10? I'm going to bring down my times. And what's the absolute value of negative 4? And then now this becomes the same sort of problem that we were working last week. We should simplify this first, right? 16 over 4 is 4. Now y'all tell me this, would we subtract or multiply first? Good, multiply first. 10 times 4 is, and then 4 minus 40 is negative 36. Now unfortunately in the calculator, typing in the absolute value bars is pretty complicated to do, and I always forget how to do it, so I'm not going to show you guys that. It'll just take up too much time. So you just have to pay close attention when you're doing these kind of problems. You can't really check yourself in the calculator. Alright, last one. Example 13, lucky number. We're going to do the absolute value of 12 plus 6 over the absolute value of 4 minus 10 minus the absolute value of 3. I think I'm going to let you guys try this one. Just give it your best shot, and then we'll go over it. Alright, did anybody get an answer? Anybody else get an answer? Alright, good. Y'all feel somewhat confident in your answer? Yeah? Okay. So the very first thing that I would do is I would simplify these here. This and this. What is 12 plus 6? 18, right? So on the top, I have the absolute value of 18. What's 4 minus 10? Negative 6. So on the bottom, I have the absolute value of negative 6. I'm just going to bring down this stuff. Now that I have nothing else to simplify, I'm going to start taking my absolute values. What's the absolute value of 18? 18, right? I'm going to come over here. 18. What's the absolute value of negative 6? Positive 6, right? Here's my minus. And then what's the absolute value of 3? 3. Before I subtract, I divide. What's 18 divided by 6? 3. And then 3 minus 3 is 0. Did y'all get that? Good. Okay. They're not going to get